June 21, 2024. The bay was glassy that morning, the kind of clear blue that makes people think danger cannot exist in sunlight. My son Tom said it would be a celebration of my recovery after 8 weeks of rehab. He used that word celebration, as if a broken hip were a reason for champagne. Lisa, his wife, helped me down to the dock, smiling too much. "We'll take it slow, Mary," she said. "You'll feel like yourself again." Her voice was syrup, her grip firm on my arm. The boat was a rented Cirre 280, white and spotless, the kind of thing Tom liked to post on his social media. Mom's big comeback. He had already taken several photos of me, insisting I wave, laugh, look grateful. Lisa filmed short clips on her phone. "Evidence," she said with a laugh, "in case you start claiming we kidnapped you." It sounded like a joke, but there was an edge to it. I remember the time exactly because the boat's clock read 10:17 a.m. The wind shifted then and Lisa told Tom to slow down. She had been pretending to film the horizon, but her phone was angled toward me. "Lisa," I said, "you do not need to record everything." She smiled without looking up. "Oh, I do. For the record." 5 seconds later she turned. There was no warning. Only the sound of her voice, clear, practiced, and calm. 5 yards, no miss. 5 billion, and we're free. Then her hands were on my back. The shock of cold water took my breath before I could scream. The boat's engine roared above me as I went under. I remember thinking how odd it was that I could still see the sunlight, distorted and pale, rippling above me. When I surfaced, gasping, the boat was already moving away. Lisa's voice carried faintly over the water. "She slipped, Tom, she slipped." Oh my God! But I saw her face. Calm. Composed. I kicked, but my right leg refused to move properly. The pain from the hip surged sharp and deep. Salt filled my mouth. I tried to call for help, but the sound died in the wind. I do not know how long I floated before I saw the kayak, a red speck growing larger. The man paddling toward me was older, strong-armed, steady. "Hold on, ma'am," he shouted. "I've got you." His name, I would later learn, was Harry Ramirez, 61, a retired firefighter. When he pulled me onto his kayak, I clung to the side, shaking. He wrapped a towel around my shoulders and said quietly, "You're safe now." But I knew I was not safe. Not yet. I watched the white Cirre shrinking into the distance. And in that moment, one clear thought settled in my mind, colder than the water around me. They would tell the world I was dead. "Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like if you've ever had to prove you're stronger than your family thought you were." Harry paddled hard for the pilings. The kayak scraped against a ladder bolted to the pier. He steadied me as I climbed, one rung at a time, my arms shaking so hard I could feel the metal vibrate. On the deck, I lay on my side, coughing up salt. Harry covered me with a gray fleece blanket and asked my name. "Mary Collins," I said. "Age 67. Pushed at 10:17 a.m. He nodded once. "I am Harry Ramirez. Retired firefighter. 61. You are not going back on that boat." He moved like a man who had carried strangers out of smoke. He checked my pupils, my pulse, and the angle of my right leg. "No new break," he said. "But you are going to bruise." He gave me his jacket and his baseball cap, then walked me to his truck, a dented blue Ford with sand in the mats. We left the kayak chained to the ladder. Harry drove without music. "We will not call 911, he said. "Not until you decide. You want to be found, you call. You want to disappear, I can help for a day." I looked at his profile. Calm. No questions. "Disappear," I said. "For now." He took surface streets, no freeways, stopping twice to check mirrors. In Point Loma, he turned onto a quiet block of small houses with succulents and wind chimes. He parked behind a white fence and led me through a side gate into a tidy garage that smelled of laundry soap and lemon oil. A woman with Harry's steady eyes met us at the door. "This is my sister, Elena," he said. "Nurse, retired. She will not talk." Elena put a towel around my shoulders and a bowl of warm water at my feet. She washed the salt from my skin as if I were family. "You will need dry clothes," she said. She brought a plain sweatshirt and men's sweatpants folded. I changed in the bathroom and studied the face in the mirror. Seaweed in my hair, water lines at my jaw, eyes that had seen what they were not supposed to see. Elena handed me tea and a heating pad. You can rest in the back room, she said. But listen first. She held up her phone. A local news alert flashed. Breaking. Boating incident. Possible drowning near harbor. The thumbnail photo was my son and his wife, taken from a holiday event in December. The caption used my name. We watched the live feed at 12:03 p.m. Tom's voice trembled in the practiced way of a man who understood cameras. My mother has been declining, he said. She gets confused. Lisa pressed a tissue to her cheek and turned slightly to the lens. She is so brave, she said. We begged her to stay on shore. I listened for one true word and did not hear it. Elena lowered the volume. You should not go home, she said. No, I said. They will be there first. Harry looked at the rug, then at me. I know someone, he said. Small motel off the highway. Cash only, no questions. Lady runs it like a lighthouse for people who need quiet. He set his large hand on the table. You trust me. I trust the water and the hands that pulled me out, I said. Yes. We left at 12:41 p.m. in Elena's sedan. She drove. Harry sat in back beside me like a bodyguard. We kept to side streets again. At a strip of palms and faded storefronts, we pulled into a roadside motel with a peeling sign. Blue Lantern Motor Lodge. A woman stood behind the office window, small and watchful, a book in her hands. Joan, Harry said through the slot. A quiet guest for a week. Joan Clark looked at my face, then at the news running silent on her counter television. She closed the book. $600 a week, she said. Cash. No ID. No housekeeping, no names, no trouble. I counted out the bills from the zippered pocket of my canvas purse. $600 exactly, plus $40 for a space heater because the room air felt like damp metal. Joan wrote room 7 in pencil on a yellow ledger. For name she drew a dash. 4 times she wrote 1:13 p.m. In the room everything was clean and old, thin towels, a quiet refrigerator, a square television on a dresser. I sat on the bed, folded the blanket over my legs, and turned on the news with the sound low. The reporter stood near the marina railing with gulls swinging behind her like paper on a string. At 1:32 p.m. Tom spoke again. We have been seeking medical opinions, he said. Her cognition is not what it was. Lisa nodded toward the microphone. We were going to petition for guardianship next week, she said, voice soft, eyes shining. To keep her safe. There it was, the word planted like a flag, guardianship. I felt the old ache under my ribs. I remembered the binder on Lisa's desk last spring labeled family care options, the stack of printed forms left on my kitchen counter to sign later. The pen she pushed toward me with a bright, "This is just a precaution." I had not signed. I had set the pen down, gone to water the roses, and listened to the house keep its secrets. At 2:05 p.m. I powered off the screen. I took a small hotel notebook from the drawer and began a list, neat and centered. June 21, 2024, 10:17 a.m. Push. 0280. Lisa. 5 yards, no miss. 5 billion and we are free. Witness. Harry Ramirez, 61. Contact secured. Hiding location. Blue Lantern, room 7. $600 cash/week, no ID. Ledger Joan Clark, 1:13 p.m. News statements Tom. Declining Lisa. Guardianship next week. I drew a square beside each line to check later with proof. Then I wrote a sentence across the bottom of the page in a slow, even hand. Let them think I am dead. Collect evidence. Speak once. Elena arrived at 4:10 p.m. With gauze arnica, a small burner phone and a bag of groceries. She taped my ribs and iced my hip. Harry set the burner on the dresser. Number ends in -4821, he said. No names on calls. If anyone asks, you are Joan's cousin. I ate crackers and applesauce. The plain food steadied me. I slept from 5 to 7:40 p.m. Then woke to my own name crawling along the bottom of the television screen. Search continues for Mary Collins, 67. A neighbor stood on my lawn telling the reporter that I had been forgetful lately. Behind her, my front porch light blinked on at the timer I had set months ago. Small details behave even when people do not. I turned off the television and stared at the blank wall. I spoke into the room the way I used to speak to my late husband when the house felt too large. Tom, I said, you will not own my life, my body, or my accounts. Not with lies. The motel heater ticked. Somewhere, a truck downshifted and faded into distance. I picked up the notebook again and added 3 more lines. Collect bank alerts from June. Find original medical records. No gaps. Identify cameras on pier. At 8:22 p.m. Harry texted the burner. I have a name for a private investigator if you want it. Works fast. Discreet. I stared at the small glowing screen and thought about the boat, the cool push, the sentence that did not belong to grief but to arithmetic, 5 billion. I replied yes. Tomorrow morning. Cash. Then I placed the phone face down and folded the blanket to my waist the way hospital nurses do. Neat corners, no drafts. Outside, the neon sign hummed. Inside, the room held its quiet like a sealed envelope. They would say dementia. They would say guardianship. They would call themselves loving. I would give them silence and time. I would give myself a ledger, a witness, and a door with a lock that answered only to my hand. Let them perform the funeral. I would be busy with the living. Morning came gray and slow. The motel curtains glowed weakly with light from the parking lot sign. I woke at 6:04 a.m. to the sound of a leaf blower outside. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then the bruise along my right side reminded me. On the nightstand lay my notebook, open to the page marked with a square beside every fact. Underneath it, the burner phone blinked once. An unread message. Harry. His name is Dan White. Former police, now private. No nonsense. $12K in cash. I texted back. Where? He sent an address on India Street and the words. Front door says accounting. I dressed in the same sweatshirt from yesterday, tied my hair, and wrapped a scarf over the bruises on my neck. At 9:11 a.m. Harry's truck pulled up. He drove without music again. The city passed in wet silence. The building was narrow, 3 stories, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a seafood restaurant. The accounting sign was faded. Inside, a single fan stirred warm air. A man sat behind a cluttered desk stacked with manila folders. Gray hair, dark jacket, small coffee cup. You are the one Harry called about, he said. His voice was gravel steady. Call me Dan. Mary Collins. He nodded once, then motioned to a metal chair. I know your face from the news. They say you drowned. I did not. That is good news for you, he said, opening a notebook. Not so good for the ones on camera. He asked for the timeline. I gave it to him the way I had written it. The time, the push, the phrase, the names. He did not interrupt. Only his pen moved short, precise marks. When I finished, he said, I will need 12,000. Cash only. I have it. He looked up then, surprised. All at once. I plan ahead, I said. And I want results before they finish building their lies. He took an envelope from his drawer and slid it across the table. You put the money here. You do not contact me, I contact you. I find what you can use, not what you want to hear. Agreed? Agreed. He handed me a prepaid phone. Number ends in -6693. Keep it off unless I call. You will hear from me in 2 days. I left the office at 10:42 a.m. The air smelled of diesel and sea. My hands trembled only once, when I passed a newspaper stand with my picture on the front page. Mary Collins missing, presumed dead. Back at the Blue Lantern, I made tea and wrote another entry. June 22, 2024, 9:17 a.m. Met investigator Dan White. $12,000 cash paid. Case file open. I underlined the date twice. At 6:03 p.m. The burner buzzed. One message. Meet me behind the bus depot, 8:30. Bring notebook. I walked there in a hooded jacket, passing the flicker of neon diners and the hum of late buses. Dan waited near the alley smoking. He handed me a plain flash drive sealed in tape. 48 hours like I promised, he said. You were right to come. What did you find? He flicked the cigarette, ground it out with his shoe. 3 names behind the guardianship papers. Pacific Care Guardians, retired Judge Nora Miller, and a bartender named Noah Bennett. All connected to your daughter-in-law. The name meant nothing to me. Bartender. Dan nodded. Noah Bennett. Works at the Blue Crane bar near the marina. Lisa's regular place. He set up cameras for her. Thought it was about some family documentary. One of those cameras never got retrieved. He held up a small SD card in a clear envelope. This one came from his GoPro. He forgot it was cloud synced. Timestamp, June 21st, 10:17 a.m. My throat tightened. The pier. Yes. The footage shows everything. You falling them watching. And it records her voice before the push, clear as day. He looked at me. 5 yards, no miss. 5 billion and we're free. I said nothing. My hands shook but my voice did not. Where is the bartender now? Still working. Still bragging. Why would he keep that recording? Dan shrugged. Insurance. Lisa promised him something. When he realized she would not pay, he kept the file. I found it stored in a private folder under his name. I also pulled a second recording. Different date. He checked his phone and showed me the screen. The file name read, Blue Crane _061824_2341. M4A. Audio only, he said. Balcony of the bar, 3 nights before your accident. Her voice again, whispering. He pressed play. The sound was faint at first. Wind, a clink of glass, a woman's low voice. Saturday I'll push her, then Mexico. I felt the words strike my chest like small hard stones. Dan stopped the playback. You have your proof. The GoPro video and the audio. Together they make intent and action. But you need to stay invisible until we trace the money. The money? He nodded. That 5 billion line, it is not a metaphor. Something is moving through your accounts or was supposed to. I will find the path. He handed me another sealed envelope. Do not open it here. Evidence chain. I paid him another 1,000. He refused at first. I left it on the bench. For your time, I said. When I returned to the motel at 9:37 p.m. The parking lot lights buzzed. Joan watched from her window but did not ask questions. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and finally opened the envelope. Inside were 2 USB drives labeled in black marker. J21_main. MP4. J18_audio. M4A. I plugged the first one into the television's side port. The screen came alive with water and sunlight. Then the deck. Lisa's face framed in brightness. She looked almost gentle. I heard her laugh. 5 yards, no miss. 5 billion and we're free. The picture shook as she moved. Then the horizon flipped and blurred with foam. I turned off the television. My hand hovered over the second drive. I forced myself to listen. The audio was rough but clear, her whisper low and certain. Saturday I'll push her, then Mexico. I sat there until the sound ended. The clock on the wall read 10:41 p.m. I wrote another line in the notebook. Evidence secured. Video plus audio. Words of intent recorded. Then beneath it, in smaller letters, truth is quiet until it is played aloud. I placed the drives in a metal tin and wrapped them in a towel. Outside, a car door slammed, followed by silence. I waited until the sound of footsteps faded before switching off the lamp. Tomorrow I would trace the money. Tonight I would let the evidence breathe. The city outside kept moving, unaware that somewhere in room 7, the dead woman they were mourning had already begun her own investigation. Morning returned pale and heavy with fog. The motel curtains barely moved, but I felt the air shift. Something in me had turned overnight, from shock into calculation. I poured instant coffee into the paper cup and opened the notebook again. Across the page I wrote, trace the money. At 7:18 a.m. Dan called from a new number. I have what you need, he said. Come to the same place, back door this time. Bring nothing you do not want searched. When I arrived, the air smelled of wet metal and diesel. Dan's office looked the same: folders, black coffee, one humming fan. But his desk now held a stack of printed bank logs. Pacific Care Guardians, he said, tapping the first page. Their name appears in a pending transfer order yesterday at 11:43 p.m. $48 million. Your signature forged. He slid the document closer. The ink was faintly smudged, but the name was unmistakable. Mary Ellen Collins. I studied the curve of each letter. Lisa had always mimicked my handwriting for holiday cards. She must have practiced. Dan pointed at the routing numbers. The transfer was queued from your family foundation account, the one created after Sam's death. But before it executed, the system flagged an inconsistency. They used the wrong authorizing code. So the money is still there. For now. He took out a flash drive. Your accountant tried to stop it. Ted Gray. He still works out of the old office in La Jolla. Looks like they went after him too. He called me this morning scared. You should see him before someone else does. I nodded. Give me his address. Dan tore a sheet from his notebook. Go before noon. He is ready to talk. Bring cash if you can. He does not want his name on any bank logs. By 10:05 a.m. I was at a narrow building painted the color of sand. The plaque read T. Gray and Associates Financial Services. Inside, the air smelled of dust and coffee. Ted Gray looked older than I remembered, thin, white-haired, hands shaking slightly. Mary, he whispered. You are alive. For now, I said. Dan said you have something for me. He closed the blinds, locked the door, and brought out a small fireproof box from under the desk. They came for everything. Emails, paper records, digital copies. Said you were incompetent, that I had to turn over your estate documents for review. Who came? Lisa. And a woman named Miller. Said she was a retired judge. She waved a paper that looked like a guardianship order but no court seal. He opened the box and pulled out a small black flash drive. I kept this hidden. It contains the real will, dated March 3, 2022, plus a letter from Sam and the original trust paperwork. I backed it up the day before your surgery. You told me once to always keep a copy. I listened. He handed me the drive with both hands as if it were fragile glass. What does the letter say? I asked. It is private, but you should read it. Sam wrote it 2 weeks before he died. He knew someone might try to rewrite the estate. I gave him $500 in cash folded in an envelope. Thank you, Ted. Keep quiet. Do not open your door to anyone you do not recognize. He nodded quickly. They are dangerous, Mary. The guardianship firm is a front. They move assets through fake care trusts. You are not the first target. I left the office and walked along the waterfront. My mind replayed Dan's words. $48 million. It was not just theft. It was an erasure. Back in room 7, I locked the door and connected the flash drive to my laptop. 3 folders opened. 1. Will _real 2022. PDF. 2. Letter _M. Docs. 3. Trust _original. Zip. I began with the will. It confirmed what I remembered. All charitable foundations intact, majority control to me until death, remainder to community programs for veterans and housing. No mention of Tom or Lisa beyond an annual stipend of $75,000. Next, the letter. It began in Sam's neat, firm typing but ended with a line written by hand. Mary, if anything happens to me, keep every document in your own possession. Never let charm talk you out of signatures. People will dress greed as duty. Trust paper, not words. Sam, March 2, 2022. I read it 3 times. Then I opened the zip file. Inside were scanned deeds, tax IDs, and a ledger showing 3 transfers Lisa had attempted to redirect. The numbers formed a pattern that ended in a single account belonging to Pacific Care Guardians. The account name matched a shell company in Nevada, registered by Judge Nora Miller. The forged guardianship petition attached to it listed me as mentally impaired, incapable of managing estate decisions. The signature of the physician was a photocopy from an old physical therapy report. They had built a legal coffin before pushing me into the water. I sat very still. My pulse slowed until I could hear the motel refrigerator hum. At 3:20 p.m. Dan called again. You have the drive? Yes. Good. Now you understand the scale. This is not just your money. Pacific Care has handled 12 estates in the past 3 years. 7 of the clients are dead. 2 under guardianship. Same pattern every time. Sudden incompetence, signature dispute, asset transfer. He paused. You have one advantage, they think you are gone. I took a deep breath. Then I will stay gone a little longer. Keep that drive off Wi-Fi. And Mary, get copies made on paper. Digital files vanish faster than lives. After the call, I turned everything to airplane mode, printed what I could at the motel office, and returned to my room with a stack of pages warm from the printer. I arranged them on the bed: will, letter, trust, bank logs. Beside them I placed the flash drive and the 2 USBs with Lisa's recordings. Evidence lined like soldiers. Then I opened the notebook again. June 23, 2024, 3:47 p.m. Evidence secured from Ted Gray. Real will dated March 3, 2022. Letter from Sam. Guardianship fraud confirmed. Below that I wrote, they called it care. It was theft in uniform. Evening settled slow. The television flickered with their lies. Tom and Lisa now sat together on the news set, holding hands. She struggled with memory, Tom said. She was signing things she did not understand. Lisa nodded, tears shining. We just wanted to protect her. I muted the screen and whispered into the empty room. You will not protect what you no longer own. At 8:12 p.m. There was a soft knock. I reached for the burner phone. Who is it? It is Joan, came the voice. You have mail. I opened the door just enough for her to slide in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a single printed message. Guardianship petition filing, scheduled July 8, 2024, San Diego County Probate Court. Under it, a handwritten note in blue ink. They are moving faster than expected. I stared at the date. 2 weeks. I turned the paper over. On the back, Dan's initials, DW. I folded the notice and placed it with the rest. Then I wrote one more line in the notebook, deliberate and steady. If they plan to speak for me in court, I will speak first. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and sat listening to the motel heater click and hum. Somewhere outside, a train horn drifted through the fog. I thought of Sam's letter, the ink trembling slightly at the edges, the sentence that had become a warning. Trust paper, not words. Tomorrow I would start building the wall of paper that would save my name. Each page a plank. Each fact a nail. And when the moment came to stand again, I would not shout or plead. I would do what Sam had taught me. Lay out the evidence line by line, and let truth speak in its own quiet voice. The next morning brought a pale, washed-out sun and the sound of trucks on the highway. I sat at the edge of the bed, watching light crawl across the motel carpet, and realized how still my hands had become. Fear had burned itself into something sharper, resolve. I spread my notes and documents across the small table, aligning every page as if building a map. At the center I wrote a name that now tied every thread together. Judge Nora Miller. Dan's report arrived by text at 9:26 a.m. Miller and Pacific Care running joint fund. Call it the guardianship bridge. Need to meet. At 10 o'clock we met in his office again. This time with blinds drawn and the desk cleared of everything but a legal pad. Dan placed a small binder in front of me, filled with photocopies, each marked with a red date stamp. Here it is, he said. Their new angle. Forget the drowning, they already have a replacement plan. He flipped the first page. It was a draft petition titled Guardianship Bridge Program, Pilot Case, Collins Family. The text was dry but the meaning was clear. Lisa and Judge Miller intended to link my estate to the guardianship of a minor, a foster child. On paper it looked philanthropic, connecting my foundations with child welfare. In reality, the child's trust would serve as a laundering channel. Money in, care disbursements out. Lisa and Miller file these bridges, Dan explained. They tie your estate to an underage beneficiary, claim shared guardianship, then transfer funds into a pooled account under Pacific Care. Easy to hide, easy to bleed. He opened a folder marked Banks, Internal Memos. The letters showed drafts of the bridge contracts, with the same signatures repeating. L. Collins and N. Miller. Dates from June 2nd to June 20th, days before the boat incident. They were preparing the paperwork while pretending to plan your recovery party, Dan said quietly. Everything was timed. I studied one line on the final draft. Subject to incapacity verification and consent of co-guardian, L. Collins. I asked, whose consent validates the transfer? He tapped the space under Miller's signature. The judge herself. It was elegant, almost beautiful in its precision. 2 signatures, no witnesses, and my money sailing away under the banner of compassion. Dan leaned back. They think the bridge scheme will look untouchable. Family guardianship plus charity equals clean optics. They have done it twice already with elderly clients who died suddenly. How much moved through those cases? 23 million in the first, 17 in the second. Both approved by Miller, both closed after the deaths. He slid another envelope toward me. Inside were bank printouts showing the flow of funds through shell entities. Starlight Family Trust, Hopeway Guardians, PCG Holdings LLC. The dates followed a perfect rhythm, like a machine built to drain. They wanted 50 million this time, he said. But their numbers say 5 billion. Why? They meant symbolic, I said. Lisa likes dramatic words. She used to joke about turning billions from old people's money. I never thought she meant it. Dan's face stayed hard. Well, she meant it enough to try. I pressed my fingers to the edge of the table. If I go to the police now, they will call me a ghost. There is still no proof I exist. Then we let them bury themselves, he said. You collect every file, every date. I will keep tracing the accounts. When the next transfer pings, I will alert the feds. You just keep quiet. At 11:47 a.m., I left the office carrying a copy of the binder. In the alley I stopped for a moment, breathing the city's exhaust and salt. For years I had taught my son to be careful, to keep receipts, to document everything. Now that same habit had become my weapon. Back in room 7, I laid the binder beside Sam's letter and the drives. The table looked like a courtroom in miniature. I began making a second list. Draft petitions filed June 2nd to 20th. Pacific Care Shell accounts. Starlight Hopeway PCG Holdings. Judge Miller primary signatory. Foster Child Trust connected through Department of Family Guardianship. Case number 2019-64. The more I read, the colder I felt. They had found a way to dress crime as kindness. At 3:32 p.m. The burner buzzed. A new number. Unknown. They know Ted Gray spoke to someone. He's missing since noon. I froze. Called Dan immediately. I know, he said. They got to him fast. Car found near Mission Valley. He's alive hiding. But we move faster now. I whispered. Then we finish it before they do. That night I could not sleep. I sat on the bed, the window cracked just enough for air, listening to the hum of traffic and the faint rattle of the motel sign. Around midnight, I powered up the laptop and opened a new document titled Evidence Chain. Every entry had date, time, and witness note. I added line after line until my eyes blurred. When I reached the bottom, I wrote, if guardianship is control, then truth is emancipation. At 2:17 a.m., I sent a single text to Dan. I want to confront them myself. He replied 2 minutes later. Soon. Gather your ground. I slept for 1 hour, woke at dawn, and walked to the diner next door for coffee. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes, refilled my cup without asking. On the TV above the counter, the morning news replayed an interview clip. Lisa stood on the courthouse steps in a beige coat, flanked by microphones. We are moving forward with the guardianship bridge, she said softly. It will help children while honoring Mary's legacy. My mother-in-law would have wanted that. The reporters clapped politely. I stared at her face, composed, glowing, the perfect widow of a living woman. Then I took out the small black notebook and wrote a final sentence for that morning. June 24, 2024. She speaks for my ghost. Soon I will speak for myself. The waitress asked if I needed anything else. Just the bill, I said. And a receipt. She tore it from her pad and handed it to me. I folded it neatly into the notebook. Every scrap mattered. Every timestamp was a seed of truth waiting to bloom. When I stepped outside, the fog had lifted. The motel sign flickered from blue to white, and the sea smelled of salt and iron. I felt the strange calm that comes before a storm, the kind of stillness that says the reckoning is near. By the end of June, I felt something shift inside me. The fear that had followed me since that morning on the water had turned into a quiet determination. Every document was printed, labeled, and sealed in its own envelope. The video, the audio, the will, the forged guardianship papers, and the bank statement that showed the attempt to move $48 million. Each piece of evidence rested on the motel table like a row of anchors holding me steady. Dan called early, his voice calm but urgent. They're meeting tomorrow with Judge Miller to finalize the guardianship bridge, he said. If you want them to see the truth, this is the moment. You'll need to show your face. I sat very still before answering. They buried me with their lies. It's time they see who they failed to kill. We planned everything in silence. Harry offered a location. An old warehouse loft he still rented on Francisco Street, near the harbor. It was private, quiet, and wired with a working power line. Joan arranged the cover story. An internal Collins Foundation audit. Invitations went out through an encrypted link to 14 of Sam's former partners and a single federal agent investigating Pacific Care. Tom and Lisa received theirs through their attorney, labeled as a compliance review. That night, I sat by the motel window with the city lights flickering beyond the glass. I reread Sam's letter, tracing the last line he had written by hand. Trust paper, not words. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow, Sam. Tomorrow they will hear the paper speak." The 1st of July arrived clear and hot. Harry drove me to the warehouse in his old truck. The streets shimmered in the heat, and the air smelled faintly of salt and rust. Inside, the space was wide and echoing, sunlight pouring through high windows streaked with dust. Dan had already set up the chairs in 2 neat rows and tested the projector. In the center of the room stood Sam's leather chair. He had sat in it during every board meeting, patient and quiet. Now it would hold me. I ran my hand over the armrest. The leather was cracked but solid. Dan checked his phone. Livestream is active. The partners are watching. Good, I said. Let them see what loyalty and greed look like side by side. At exactly 12:04 p.m., the heavy door rolled open. Tom stepped in first, his eyes uncertain. Lisa followed in a beige coat and dark glasses. A young man in a suit hovered behind them, clutching a briefcase. When Tom saw me, he froze. "Mom!" His voice cracked. "How?" Lisa's face went pale. "You're supposed to be dead." I finished for her. That was the plan. I pointed to the chairs. "Sit down." They hesitated, but Dan's quiet nod made them obey. I opened the small box on the table. Inside were the items that would end their lives. "This is Sam's original will, dated March 3, 2022, I said evenly. "This is the bank statement showing your attempt to move $48 million into Pacific Care Guardians. And this," I lifted the GoPro, "is the truth you hoped would sink to the bottom of the bay." Lisa's lips trembled. "Mary, please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You pushed me into the water and told the world I was confused. You wanted control, not care." Dan dimmed the lights and started the projection. On the wall, the image flickered to life. Bright water, sunlight, the deck of the Sea Ray. Then Lisa's clear voice filled the room. 5 yards, no miss. 5 billion, and we're free." Tom covered his mouth. Lisa shook her head violently. That was taken out of context." The next file began to play. The Blue Crane recording from June 18th. The whisper was unmistakable. "Saturday I'll push her, then Mexico." Lisa's hands flew to her face. No, that's not real. Someone edited." Dan stopped the video. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the projector. I looked directly at them. "You accused me of dementia. You told lawyers I was incapable of making decisions. You forged a guardianship to take what Sam and I built for others. You used a foster child's trust to wash your theft clean. Do you deny it now?" Tom's voice came small and thin. "Mom, we were in debt. Lisa said it was only temporary." "Temporary," I said softly. "You called it protection. You called it love. But love doesn't sign false petitions and watch a mother drown." Lisa's calm broke. "You were impossible to reason with. Always controlling, always judging. We had to do something." Dan stepped forward. "You did something, all right. You left a trail longer than the marina." I took a slow breath. This is not about anger. It is about restitution and truth. Here are my terms. You will confess to what you've done. You will cooperate fully with federal investigators in exposing Judge Miller and the guardianship ring. You will withdraw from every Collins Foundation permanently. And you will keep a distance of 300 yards from me for the rest of your lives." Lisa stared at me, breathing hard. "And if we don't?" Dan's voice came calm, almost kind. Then the agents waiting outside will escort you somewhere less comfortable. The warehouse door opened. 2 plainclothes officers stepped in, followed by a familiar face. Noah Bennett, the bartender. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were clear. "I brought everything," he said quietly. "The backups, the cloud files, and the texts between me and Lisa." Lisa turned on him, voice sharp. "You were part of this. You can't." "No," he said. "Not anymore." Agent Rachel Chong approached. "Lisa Collins, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and falsification of federal documents. Thomas Collins, you are charged with conspiracy and financial misconduct." Lisa tried to move toward me, but Carter, the second agent, caught her arm. Tom didn't resist. His shoulders sagged as if the air had left his body. They were led toward the door, the sound of handcuffs closing like the final clap of a gavel. I sat still, watching the sunlight on the floor. The projector showed the frozen frame of Lisa's hand pushing forward. Dan turned off the feed. "It's done," he said softly. "No," I replied. "It's only beginning. The others will fall next." He nodded once. "And you?" "I will rest," I said. "At least for tonight." That evening, back at the motel, I watched the news in silence. The headlines scrolled across the screen. "Missing heiress found alive. Guardianship ring exposed." The camera showed Lisa being led into a police car. Tom behind her, head down. I muted the television and sat for a long time, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator. Then I took out my notebook and wrote, "July 1st, 2024, I spoke and the truth did not stutter." Beneath it, one final line for the day. "Peace does not arrive with applause. It arrives with locked doors, quiet rooms, and the knowledge that your name belongs only to you again." The morning after the confrontation, sunlight flooded through the thin motel curtains like a slow announcement. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. When I woke, the air in the room felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. The television was already murmuring when I turned it on. The headline stretched across the screen. "Guardianship Fraud Network Collapses. Former judge among those detained." The anchor's voice was steady, almost respectful. "New details have emerged following the arrest of Lisa and Thomas Collins," she said. "Federal agents have confirmed the existence of a multimillion-dollar fraud ring involving the guardianship firm Pacific Care Guardians and retired Judge Nora Miller." Footage followed. Lisa, pale and trembling, being led into a courthouse. Tom, silent, head bowed. Behind them, a swarm of cameras and shouted questions. I watched the scene without emotion, only noting the way Lisa tried to look toward the lens as if still performing grief. The report continued. Late last night, investigators stopped Judge Miller on Interstate 15, where she was found in possession of $380,000 in cash and multiple foreign bank statements. Authorities believe she was attempting to flee the state. The words settled slowly, like sand in clear water. Miller's name, once spoken with reverence, now sounded hollow. I turned off the sound and sat with my coffee cooling beside me. On the notebook's next clean page, I wrote, "July 2nd, 2024, they fell by their own paperwork." Dan called around noon. "It's moving fast," he said. The federal team found 7 previous estates linked to Pacific Care, all listed as accidental deaths, all handled by Miller. Do they have proof? More than enough. Noah's files open the whole chain. Every hidden transfer, every draft petition. "And Noah?" I asked. "He'll testify," Dan said. "They're offering witness protection. He'll disappear for a while, but he did the right thing." There was a pause, the kind that usually carries something unspoken. "Mary," Dan said quietly, "you should think about leaving too. The media will circle you for weeks." "I'm not running anymore," I said. "Let them talk. I will stay until the last signature is corrected." By July 4th, my story had become public record. Newspapers printed my photograph beside words like survivor and whistleblower. Some reporters called me the woman who came back from the dead. Others used colder terms. The heiress who watched her own murder fail. I read none of it aloud. Truth did not need decoration. Harry came by that evening with a bag of groceries and a small American flag folded under his arm. "Thought you might want to see fireworks," he said. We watched from the motel balcony. The bursts of color rose above the bay, silent at first, then cracking open the dark. Harry leaned on the railing, hands rough and steady. "Never thought I'd see justice in real time," he said. "Justice," I answered. "No fireworks needed." He smiled faintly. "Still, it looks good on the sky." When the last flare faded, he turned to me. "What will you do now?" "Finish what Sam started," I said. "The foundations need rebuilding. And there's a child whose trust they tried to use as a funnel. I want him protected properly." Harry nodded. "You'll be good at that." Weeks passed. Each morning brought a new line in my notebook: court dates, restitution filings, the slow work of untangling forged signatures. Lisa cooperated through her lawyer. Tom pled guilty after 3 days of silence. On August 9th, the sentences were read aloud. Tom received 22 years in prison for conspiracy and financial fraud. Lisa was sentenced to 18 years for attempted murder, forgery, and exploitation of vulnerable adults. Her lawyer's voice trembled when he spoke of regret and confusion. The judge answered, "Regret is not a defense." Judge Miller's trial would come later. She remained in federal custody without bail. When the hearing ended, I walked outside into the heat. The courthouse steps gleamed under the sun, and the smell of asphalt rose sharp and clean. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I kept walking. I had already spoken. There was nothing left to explain. That evening, back at the Blue Lantern, Joan left a pot of tea at my door without knocking. A note lay beside it: "For the woman who taught the truth to swim." I smiled for the first time in months. The air smelled faintly of jasmine. I turned on the radio instead of the television. A quiet station was playing old standards, music Sam used to hum when he worked in the garden. I let it fill the small room. When the song ended, I opened the window. The harbor wind carried the scent of salt and diesel, the same smell that had met me the day Harry pulled me from the water. For a moment, the memory no longer hurt. It only felt distant, like a closed book. I whispered, "It's done." The notebook lay open on the desk, its last page still blank. I wrote slowly, carefully, letting each letter settle like a final stone. August 10th, 2024, the truth came up for air and so did I. Then beneath it, smaller: "Peace is not revenge. It is the quiet after the evidence speaks." Days later, Dan stopped by one last time. He looked tired but content. "The feds closed the guardianship case," he said. "They're using your files as a model for new legislation. They'll call it the Collins Act." I almost laughed. "After all that, they name it after me? Seems fitting," he said. "You built a wall with paper and courage. That's more than most of them ever manage." When he left, I sat on the bed and listened to the door click shut. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was earned. Outside, gulls circled over the harbor. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter carried through the warm wind. I thought of the boy whose trust had nearly been stolen, and of the promise I had made to protect him. Soon I would make good on that promise. But for now, I let myself rest, the pen still in my hand, the air moving gently through the open window. I had survived lies, greed, and the cold water that should have been my grave. And now, for the first time in years, I belonged entirely to myself. Autumn came quietly that year. The heat softened, the light turned golden, and the sound of the harbor changed from engines to gulls. The headlines faded one by one, replaced by newer scandals. For the first time in a long while, my name was not in the news. I liked the silence. My assets had been restored through a series of long, careful meetings. The charitable foundations reopened under federal supervision. Dan oversaw the final audits, then handed me a single folder labeled, "All Cleared." I remember how light it felt compared to the weight of everything that came before. On the first cool morning of spring, I drove to the orphanage listed in the bridge documents, the one Lisa and Judge Miller had planned to use as their false beneficiary. The building was small, painted white, with geraniums blooming along the walkway. The director, a woman named Mrs. Hale, met me at the gate. She had soft gray hair and the steady patience of someone who had seen too much and kept going anyway. "You're Mary Collins," she said. "I saw your case on the news. We didn't know about the fraud until the investigators came." I nodded. "I'm not here for that. I came to meet someone." She smiled gently and led me through a narrow hallway smelling of soap and crayons. In a sunlit room, a few children were playing with blocks. One boy, about 3 years old, was sitting alone near the window, stacking toy boats in a line. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and his concentration reminded me of Sam when he was young. Mrs. Hale whispered, "That's Robert. He's been here since he was a baby. Quiet boy. He doesn't speak much, but he listens to everything." I walked toward him and knelt beside the small pile of boats. "That one looks fast," I said. He glanced up, wary at first, then nodded. "It goes to the sea." "Yes," I said. "It does." For a long moment we just sat there arranging the boats. His hands were small and careful, his eyes bright with a kind of watchfulness I recognized. I knew, without needing to ask, that this was the child they had planned to use, the one whose trust was supposed to launder my fortune. 2 months later, I returned with papers of my own, real ones, not forged. By then, the adoption had been reviewed and approved. On May 14, 2025, he became Robert Sam Collins. The first time he called me Mama, his voice was soft, almost testing the word. I felt something unclench deep inside me, something I hadn't known was still locked. We moved into a small house near Point Loma, close to the sea. Harry helped fix the porch railings, and Joan brought over an old lamp from the Blue Lantern as a housewarming gift. The light it cast was warm and steady, the kind of light that made a room feel safe. Robert liked to sit on the steps in the evenings and count the passing boats. Sometimes he'd look up and say, "That one's yours." I would smile and answer, "No, sweetheart. Mine stays on the shore now." The trials dragged on for the rest of the year. Judge Miller received 25 years without parole. Pacific Care Guardians dissolved under federal order. The other estates were returned to their rightful families, some too late to matter but still restored in name. Dan retired after the case closed. He came by once to say goodbye. "You built something honest from all that wreckage," he told me. "Not everyone does." "Maybe honesty is just the final luxury," I said. He smiled. "Keep it then. You earned it." When he left, I stood on the porch and watched his car disappear down the hill. The sun had already dropped behind the water, leaving the sky painted with gold and violet. Inside, Robert was drawing at the kitchen table. He lifted the paper proudly when I came in. It was a crayon sketch of a little house with blue windows, a garden, and a big round sun. "That's us," he said. "And that's the sea." I taped it to the refrigerator door beside an old photograph of Sam in his uniform. For a while I just stood there, listening to the kettle whistle and the faint rustle of wind through the open window. By summer, life had settled into quiet order. Mornings began with the smell of toast and Robert's laughter. Afternoons, we tended the small garden out back, basil, rosemary, and a single lemon tree that Harry had planted for us. Evenings, we sat on the porch, reading picture books until the light faded. Sometimes, when Robert was asleep, I would step outside and look at the dark water in the distance. The memory of that day on the boat still came back, sharp, cold, unstoppable, but now it carried no fear. Only a reminder of what survived. I learned that peace is not something that arrives with victory or applause. Peace is a quiet house, a full cupboard, a child breathing evenly in the next room. It is the absence of fear, and the presence of your own name spoken kindly again. I keep Sam's letter framed above my desk now. The final line has faded a little, but I still read it each morning before I start the day. Trust paper, not words. Saved me once. But I've come to learn that paper can hold more than warnings. It can also hold beginnings, adoption papers, school forms, drawings with shaky letters that say Mom. Robert's voice fills the house now. Sometimes he runs to me, holding one of his toy boats, and says, "Look, Mama, it floats." And I always answer the same way. "Yes, my love. It floats." Because I know now that survival isn't about vengeance or fortune. It's about finding the strength to stay above water, to rebuild, to choose what family means. So here is what I tell myself each night before turning off the lamp. Guard your passwords. Check who's holding your guardianship. Trust the ones who show up without asking for anything. And remember, sometimes a camera and a kayak can save not only your life, but the truth itself. Then I close my notebook, turn off the light, and let the quiet fill the house. The sea hums softly beyond the window. Robert stirs in his sleep. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that tomorrow will simply be ordinary, and that ordinary is enough.